He didn't leave as Pope. He left as a dad. A last prayer heard around a world that is losing hope. No one thought that Pope Francis's last moments would be so moving. It was just a weak body holding an old rosary and whispering. There were no wonders or halos. Everyone was shocked. It was so quiet that even his enemies bowed. There was a break. Not power, but the gap between the church and people. What made him decide to leave in silence? What did he say in his last message that made so many people cry? This isn't just a story about leaving. It is the last melody of a strong soul. Watch now, before everyone forgets one of the most important hours in faith's history. The last prayer of blessing. In St. Peter's Square on April 20, 2025, there was a different vibe than any other Easter before. While the sky was clear, the bells tolled, and the square was full of believers, there was a strong sense that something was very different. No one said it out loud, but everyone had a hazy feeling of seeing something holy and final. Pope Francis didn't walk in like he usually does. He was seated, quiet, and looked thinner than normal. After a bad case of bronchitis, everyone had been worried about his health for weeks. Even though he was released from the hospital, everyone knew he wasn't fully better. He was very brave to choose to be there, even if it was just to sit quietly and give the Urbi et Orbi greeting to the city and the world. Surprisingly, Archbishop Diego Ralli read the Easter message instead of the Pope this year, which was both sad and beautiful. He sat there with his hands on his knees and looked out at the tens of thousands of loyal fans waving flags. Tears came to his eyes like a father who knew this was the last time he would see his kids. This time, the message he had written wasn't just a polite address. It was more like a spiritual statement than a normal speech. First, he said the well-known words, "Christ is risen." But right away, his tone changed. Deep, powerful, and tinged with hopelessness, but also woven with faith. That hope is not a way out, it's a task. It doesn't trick us, instead, it gives us power. That line had a soft but deep effect on the people who heard it. Many people thought that the Pope knew that moment, when he looked out at the crowd with tears in his eyes, that this would be the last time he would stand in front of people and talk about hope, which was what he had always lived for. That hope wasn't sweet or silly, it was tried in tears, war, and the world's lack of care. Pope Francis didn't stop there. He kept doing what he had always done under his leadership. Support those who are being left out. He talked about unborn babies, elderly people who were left alone, refugees who were turned away, abused women, and people who society thought were useless. Every word was like a last plea, as if he were saying, "Please don't forget them if you want to remember me." Every life is important to him. The life of a baby in the womb, as well as the lives of the sick and old, who are seen as trash in more and more countries. Pope Francis didn't hesitate to name the wars in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and the Congo, even though the whole world was in shock. He didn't pick nice words. He made a strong, almost desperate, plea for peace out of boundless love. I want us to have hope again that peace can happen. Some people believe that their last words show what they really care about. Thus, this is what Francis would have everyone remember. When he was nearing the end of his life and still had the strength to write a speech, he decided to talk about love, kindness, and a world without combat and death. Many people in the Vatican had the idea that the Pope wrote the 2025 Easter message while he was in the hospital coughing and being cared for by nuns. He may have even made changes to the first draft while he was sick and couldn't sit up straight. If that were true, then every word in that letter was not just words, it was his soul sent out into the world. As Archbishop Ralli read the last piece, which was about how life beats death, the Pope raised his hand to his chest and looked off into the distance, his lips moving as if he were praying. A lot of people said he was saying, "Jesus, I trust you." No one could prove it, but everyone felt the same way. Everyone was quiet when they saw a man getting ready to leave, even though he didn't say anything. He slowly raised his hand to bless the people when the reading was over. It was a move that everyone knew, but that day it felt heavier than ever. He was weak not because of his health, but because of the weight of a lifetime, or reign. A lot of faithful people in the square knelt. Some people couldn't keep their tears from coming out. Let's put our trust in him, because only he can make things new. In that last line, the prayer, the message ended, and maybe it also ended Pope Francis's public life. It wasn't just a service. It was a goodbye, and maybe everyone there felt it deep down that day. Part 2. A quiet death. There wasn't a lot of noise when he left, but everyone couldn't keep quiet. In the early hours of Easter Monday, April 21, 2025, millions of Catholics around the world were still celebrating the resurrection of Christ. In the Vatican, where the stone hallways are very old, news was as quiet as a breeze. He was no longer alive, Pope Francis. There will be no parades, sirens, or bright lights. He left in the same way he had lived, happily, quietly, and simply. At 7:35 a.m., the death was found to be real. By Cardinal Kevin Frell, the Camelingo, who takes over running the Holy See while a position opens up. Frell talked to the reporters in a calm voice. Today at 7:35 a.m., Francis, the Bishop of Rome, went back to the parental home. He worked hard his whole life to serve the Lord and his Church. A short line, but it was enough for those who heard it to feel the huge loss. In the small room in Casa Santa Marta, the home Pope Francis had chosen from the start of his term as Pope, he quietly breathed his last. A lot of ideas went around about those last hours. According to reports inside the Vatican, around 5 o'clock a.m. the nuns who worked in the Santa Marta guest house saw some strange things. His heartbeat became weak, and medicine didn't help. The medical team was called right away. But the next statement said that Pope Francis had a severe stroke and acute heart failure. It wasn't a surprise that he died, but it still left people stunned. The Pope had been in danger of dying before. A few months ago, he was treated for bilateral pneumonia, which is a serious problem that is especially dangerous for older people. During his 38 days in JLI University Hospital, his health was closely watched, but people inside the Vatican knew he was fighting for his life. He was sent home on March 23 and was said to be in a stable state of health when he got back to Casa Santa Marta. From that point on, though, he was rarely seen during the day, except for the tragic Easter Sunday, April 20, when he sat alone on the balcony and gave someone else his last message to read. Some people say that Pope Francis's death wasn't sudden, but rather a slow process that he had been mentally preparing for a long time. He told America magazine in an interview, "I am at peace with whatever the Lord decides. I have always said that when the Lord calls, I will go." This was written when he was healthy. And it's possible that the Lord did call him on Easter Monday, picking that day to bring his good worker home. Many people were moved by the fact that there were no groups of cardinals around him or loud prayers during his last moments. The nurses, the nuns, and the confessor were the only close people who knew him well. He had a small wooden cross put on his chest. News stories say that in his last moments, he didn't say much but held his rosary beads very tightly. It was said to be the same rosary his mother had given him when he was 7 years old. A simple string of smoothed-out wooden beads that now look like they are connected to the soul of the Pope, who spent his whole life praying for other people. No one wrote down what Pope Francis said, and there was no public announcement of a last word like in a story. But the priest who was by his bedside said that Pope Francis only said one last thing: "May they all be loved." There are no names, countries, or themes. There is only a plea. Love them all. Simple, but loud enough to make everyone stop what they were doing. The whole world seemed to stop breathing at that moment. As the bells of St. Peter's Basilica tolled for a long time, the Vatican entered a state of sedicanti, which was one of the holiest and most serious times in the history of the Catholic Church. As soon as they started, the usual ceremonies began. The apartment of the Pope, though one small room, was locked. As a way to confirm history, the Cardinal Cameo put the seals on the door. Many people saw Pope Francis's death not as the end, but as the end of a journey of faith. During his more than 12 years as Pope, he lived like a shepherd who smells like his sheep, He was easy to talk to, kept things simple, and never put himself above others. He chose to leave the world in the same way now. Nobody said goodbye or held a ceremony. There was just a quiet return like a prayer. And for the billions of people who were sad about his death, it wasn't because he was dead, it was because they knew that in a noisy world, a man who always chose to be quiet, listen, and love had just left for good. Part 3. A tradition of kindness. When white smoke rose from the chimney of the Sign Chapel on March 13, 2013, it marked the start of a new era for the Catholic Church. This event is still strongly remembered by many. No one thought the man named that day would be Jorge Mario Bergoglio, an obscure Argentine cardinal, and even fewer thought he would choose the name Francis, which has never happened before in the history of the Pope. But that shock was the start of a journey of deep kindness and change. Francis is a name that makes people think of Saint Francis of Assisi, who gave up his wealth to live with the poor. That decision alone showed that he wanted a different church, one that was closer, less fancy, and more active. A lot of people thought that picking this name was also a quiet attack on the Vatican's long-standing conservatism. He became more than just the Pope after that. He became the live embodiment of a deeply humane reform. When he became Pope, Pope Francis quickly turned down the offer to live in the Apostolic House, which had been the home of popes for hundreds of years. He instead picked a small room in Casa Santa Marta, which was the home of priests and tourists. This wasn't just a symbolic act. That's what it said. I'm one of you. From that humble spot, he led one of the biggest religious groups in the world, with a budget in the billions of euros and impact around the world. That simplicity was not only in his home, but also in the way he lived. He carried an iron cross instead of a gold one and wore simple clothes. He called the faithful by name, drove a Ford Focus instead of a limousine, and often left the Vatican to go to jails, refugee camps, and hospitals. Many people will never forget the pictures of the Pope washing the feet of refugees, hugging disabled people, and talking to homeless people. They were seen all over the world and will always be remembered. But there was a strong and brave spirit of change hidden behind the image of a gentle father. Franz Joseph didn't avoid tough problems. Money issues at the Vatican, the problem of sexual abuse, women's rights, climate change, migration, and unfair wages. He set up an independent financial commission, made Vatican organizations be open about how much money they spent, and looked into corruption that had been going on for decades. He once said, "Money should serve, not rule." This was an honest, almost revolutionary comment in a field that has long been linked to power and money. He was also the first person to put women in high roles in the Vatican. Some conservative cardinals didn't agree with Pope Francis's choices, like Sister Natalie Beckart, who was the Under-Secretary of the Senate of Bishops, and Barbara Jotta, who was the first woman to lead the Vatican museums. But Francis stayed firm. Others thought he had carefully planned each step, making sure they were strong enough to make change but not so strong that they would break the church. Of course, no one can be in charge without being criticized. People said he was too forgiving and forward-thinking. There were even cardinals who publicly questioned his authority. But it's strange that Francis never replied back. He didn't say anything and kept working and meeting with people. An experienced reporter for La Repubblica once said, "He has the patience of a monk and the stubbornness of a prophet." People still remember his speech to the U.S. Congress in 2015, where he talked about Martin Luther King Jr. As examples of faith, fairness, and freedom, Dorothy Day, Abraham Lincoln, and Thomas Marin. It wasn't just a speech. This was an announcement of a pontificate lived for kindness. A lot of people thought that Francis wanted to step down like his predecessor, Benedict XVI. Some people inside the company said he had thought about going back to Argentina and living alone there. But until the end of his life, he kept working, going to Mass, and being present. Because, as he said, herders can't leave their sheep. So, now that he has gone back to the Lord, what is left is not a list of titles or things he has done, but the changes that will never go back. Many people were touched not by rituals but by a look, a smile, and a handshake, which brought back their confidence. Perhaps what will last in the hearts of those he once loved is the memory of a pope who didn't sit on a chair but walked among his people. People who once thought the church was far away now see it as close as a father, a brother, or a friend. Part 4. Worldwide Grief. When word spread that Pope Francis had died early on April 21, 2025, people all over the world were sad and thought of him. People who aren't Catholic, political and religious leaders, and people from around the world all showed respect for a pope who was seen as a model of kindness and humility. The President of the United States wrote on Truth Social, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis. May God bless him and all who loved him." Former President Joe Biden called him one of the most important leaders of our time and praised his unwavering work for social justice and the poor. In Europe, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, praised the Pope for being a brave and humble leader during hard times. King Charles III told him how much he admired his work to bring people of different religions and groups together. French President Emmanuel Macron talked about the Pope's job to bring joy and hope to those who are suffering and said that he hoped this hope would last forever. In Asia, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, called the Pope a shining example of kindness, humility, and spiritual strength. Also thanking him for how much he cared about the people of India. President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine remembered how the Pope could bring comfort and hope through prayer and unity. Russian President Vladimir Putin sent his deepest sympathies and praised the Pope's work to bring the Russian Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches together. In Africa, Mahmoud Ali Youf, chairperson of the African Union Commission, praised the Pope's unwavering dedication to the region, especially his work to give voice to those who don't have one, promote peace and reconciliation, and stand with those who are hurt by conflict and poverty. In Oceania, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, said that the Pope was like a loving and devoted father to all Catholics and that Australians of all religions would mourn his death. In Latin America, Argentine President Javier Milei was very sad about the death of his colleague and emphasized how important he was to peace and justice. A lot of other heads of state in the area sent their respects, and many were planning to attend the funeral. Pope Francis was praised and respected by people all over the world, from faithful Catholics to people of other faiths. A lot of people met in St. Peter's Square at the Vatican to pray and remember him. A lot of people brought flowers, candles, and pictures of the Pope to show how much they loved and respected him. Part 5. Last Resting Place. After Pope Francis died on April 21, 2025, a new period in the history of the Catholic Church began. This was notable not only because a beloved Pope died, but also because of the strange choices he made about his funeral and where he would be buried. He asked that he be buried at the Basilica de Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome instead of St. Peter's Basilica, which is what usually happens. Since Pope Leo XIII in 1903, this is the first time in more than 100 years that a pope has decided to be buried somewhere other than the Vatican. This choice shows how much he loved the Virgin Mary and the Salus Populi Romani icon, a picture of the Madonna that he often visited before and after every foreign trip. The funeral for Pope Francis is set for April 25 to April 27, 2025, and many religious people and world leaders are expected to attend. Before that, his body will rest in peace in his private church at Casa Santa Marta, where fans can visit and pray. Following that, the body will be taken to St. Peter's Basilica so that people could continue to see the body before the official burial mass. A unique thing about Pope Francis's funeral is that he will be buried in a simple wooden box, which is a reflection of the simple life he always lived. The coffin will be buried straight in the ground inside the Basilica de Santa Maria Maggiore. It will have no fancy decorations on it, just the word Franciscus written on it. This is a big change from the triple coffins made of wood, zinc, and precious wood that were used at previous pope funerals. As is customary, a small bag will be put inside the coffin before it is sealed. It will contain coins made during his time as pope and a short summary of his rule. They will read this statement out loud before putting it in a tube the shape of a cone and then into the coffin. This will serve as a record of the important events in his rule for future generations. The Catholic Church will be in a state of official grief for 9 days after the funeral. This is called the November Dale. Services and prayers will be held all over the world at this time to remember and celebrate Pope Francis's life and work. After that, the College of Cardinals will hold a conclave to choose a new pope, whose job it will be to lead the Catholic Church around the world. Pope Francis chose the Basilica de Santa Maria Major as his final resting place. This was not only his personal choice, but also a sign of the changes and improvements he made to the Church. He once said, "I have always given my life and my work as a priest and bishop to Mary, the Mother of God. That is why I wish that my body would rest at the Basilica de Santa Maria Major after I die, awaiting the resurrection." This choice also shows how much he loved the Virgin Mary and how close he was to the faithful. One of the four main basilicas in Rome is the Basilica de Santa Maria Major, which he often went to pray. The fact that he was buried there shows that he wanted to stay close to the community and keep helping people even after he died. People will always remember Pope Francis not only for the changes he made and the big choices he made, but also for the love, compassion, and humility he showed during his life of service. For many, his final resting place at the Basilica de Santa Maria Major will be a holy place where they can remember and pray for a pope who did his job well. Epilogue: The Memory of a Shepherd. There were no big rituals or showy goodbyes for Pope Francis. He left in peace. Still, it was that simplicity that silenced the world, as if everyone bowed down to something greater than faith, a legacy of deep compassion. As he once said, the Church is not a museum for saints, but a hospital for sinners. This saying not only spoke to the hearts of millions of believers, but it also became a powerful statement of his mission, to build a church with open doors that welcomes everyone and doesn't judge them. Today, the world is split up by hate, politics, and a cold, indifferent heart. He did something that not all religious leaders are brave enough to do. When you leave the Vatican's old stone walls, you can meet people who are covered in the dust of the world. He got down on his knees to wash the feet of prisoners, welcomed refugees, and heard the words of people who had been forgotten by society. There were no cameras or PR statements, just a heart that wanted to learn, love, and heal. He may have been torn between the strict rules of the Vatican and his own desire for change, according to many theories. If that was true, though, he didn't pick the easy way out. He dedicated himself, and by doing so, he left a mark that can't be erased. Statues that were built after the dead are talked about. What Pope Francis left behind, on the other hand, is not in marble, but in every little thing he does. A poor person in Nairobi getting clean water. A Syrian child who was saved from a boat of refugees. A nun in Bolivia would like to be heard. These are the figures that are alive, and they will last. His funeral isn't the end, it's the start of a calling for all of us, whether we believe or not, to live with Francis's spirit of being bravely humble, loving everyone no matter what, and true to the truth. After the people leave the square, the TV shows end, and the Vatican slowly gets back to its normal schedule, one thing will still be there. The last words are not in his mouth, but they are in everything he does. One follower wrote that he preached louder with quiet than with words, so he didn't need to say much. He was a shepherd in a skeptical age, a lighthouse in the storm of faith, and proof that power and humility can live together. He also showed that faith is not a chain, but a doorway to love. As Pope Francis rests, his word lives on, may they all be loved. And maybe that simple, plain, theologically simple saying shows the world why he was called the Pope of the Heart.